Save your pity for the weak. Let go, no more excuses. Let go of the life you've known. Listen to your intuition. Don't let fear control. Let go of the life you've known. Don't let fear go. I won't live at the bottom anymore. Destroy the weak. So be
What is going on right now? Oh, John's having a geriatric moment, just like he has almost all day. Let me tell you about how my day started real quick, because as most of you know who've been watching this show for any length of time, you know that I have two pugs, and every morning we let them out and we get their food. And like on cold mornings, I'll go start the car and let it warm up. Anyway, I let them out, and then I went to start the car. And I was like, where are the dogs? And I look between the neighbors' houses behind me, and I see the dogs just crossing the street behind us. So I get super upset. I go taking off down there to get them. And of course, I'm like yelling their names, and they got their noses to the ground looking for a place to do their business. I'm getting super PO'd, like super angry. And then I go pick them up. I'm like, I'm not even shooing you with my foot. I'm just going to pick you both up. I'm going to carry you back to the yard. Well, I was so upset while carrying these two little critters that I stepped on a patch of ice and went down on my left side. So the dog in my left hand went off. I caught myself, scraped the hell out of my knee. And then I put the dog down, and I was like, just get your ass in the yard. I was so upset. I was so pissed. And so the other dog, my wife's dog, just decides in the neighbor behind me to just start squatting and pooping in his yard. So I gave it a little tap on the bead, and I was like, get in. And I just picked her up, walked her, set her back. And then my dog is just like, hey, what are we doing now? Following right behind me. And I put my wife's dog on the ground, and it just runs to the front porch like, I don't even need to poop anymore. I feel like I'm going to die at any minute, so just let me in, and I'll eat, and I'll be a good girl. So that's how my day started. It's not so bad now, but I was having geriatric moments at times today. So if I'm a little off, forgive me. I have sat in a conference room for 2 solid days taking a class. And before I record, if any of you in the business world has ever heard of HOP training, which is human and organizational processing. I generally, if I go to a seminar or a class, sometimes I learn a lot of cool stuff, and other times I'm ready for somebody to put a gun in my mouth and pull the trigger. Just take me out because I'm tired of hearing this crap. The HOP program, the way it was described, especially if you work in the corporate world, is kind of cool in one way, because it trains you. So say there's an incident, right? Instead of you just saying, oh, that guy's dumb and he did something dumb, and now, we have to discipline this person. It makes you take a look at the system that they're in from their perspective and see that if you haven't made things overly complicated causing this with your system. So instead of you looking at the person and just saying, well, they're dumb, it forces you to ask different questions, look at the system instead of the individual. Now, it's not taking away accountability. It's just forcing you to look at everything in a different way. And because there's psychology and everything built in, I was nerding out the whole time, but I was still sitting on my ass in a room for, let's say, 12 hours, between 12 and a half, 13 hours between 2 days. So my brain is not still functioning at a high level. But enough of that. Let's start the recording and get right into the show.
In the restaurant of life, we're putting freedom back on the menu. It's the Missouri Liberty Report with John Williams, working with grassroots organizations and legislatures to make Missouri the freest state in the nation. Let freedom ring.
All right, folks, and we're back with another edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. Thanks to all of you who continue to watch on YouTube, Rumble, catch the audio on the radio or on the podcast side. Thank you very much. The download numbers have shot up again 2 weeks in a row, so that is kind of cool. Okay, folks. Now, I haven't been doing my due diligence because things have been a little nutty lately for me with the new job and me intaking all this information. But I still want to work on the Coolidge Day event. I still want to do that thing. So I haven't forgot about it. It's just been like my brain hasn't been focused on talking to the park board about the pavilion. I got an interesting phone call last night from someone who works for Austin Peterson. Now, the reason he called me is because I was on his email list when he ran for Senate as a Republican. And when was that? Was that like 2016 or something like that? Brandon, do you remember what year he ran? No? Okay. Anyway, I think it was either, I want to say 2016. It might have been 2012. But anyway, he ran for Senate. I backed him. And now he's got his Wake Up America show, and it's on Rumble and YouTube and all these other things, right? So the guy was just like, hey, I didn't know if, okay, Catherine, thank you, 2016. He was like, hey, I didn't know, I know you have followed Austin, you've backed him, you were a backer of his, blah, blah, blah. I didn't know if you were aware of his show that he has. I'm like, yeah, I'm aware of it. I know he was on the radio, and then he went to this. And apparently Austin is building up some kind of network because he sees the media the way a lot of us see it. The mainstream media is kind of a dying breed. So it's got his show and two other shows that he's kind of backing. So he was talking about that, and I said, well, we've got a podcast too. And he's like, oh, what is it? And I was like, you can find it on YouTube and Rumble. But I brought up the Coolidge Day thing, and I told him I had messaged Austin, but I hadn't nailed down a date, and that's what Austin's wanting. And I said I would get to work on that. And so what he's going to do, this is no guarantee, folks. This is kind of what we discussed. And so I'm not making any promises. We'll see what comes of this. He said that Austin might be getting a hold of me, and that maybe it would be cool that if Austin and in his shop would just develop some swag that people could buy for the Coolidge Day. Now, I want Austin to show up and speak at the event because that would be a heck of a keynote speaker. As Brandon said last night when I called him to talk to him, one of the most noteworthy, if not the most noteworthy libertarian in Missouri, right? Even though Austin's kind of strayed away a little bit from pure like libertarian thought. If you listen to his show, sometimes you're like, not very libertarian, but whatever. He ran as a libertarian in 2016. So if I can get him to show up, that would be a heck of a way to kick off an event. Because I figure, like I could speak. If Brandon wants to speak, he could speak. Tom Martz, Catherine Dreyer, if Sam Britton wanted to talk. But then Austin would be the final speaker because Austin has been pretty good about promoting Calvin Coolidge and all the great things about Calvin Coolidge. So I thought, you couldn't hardly pick a better guy to show up for an event and speak about these things. So that is something that I hope we get to discuss soon. I'm not going to lie. Yes, it would be. I feel like if Austin Peterson showed up to the first one, we're setting the bar pretty high. And so the following years, we're really going to have to work to like make it bigger and better. So I don't know. Maybe I'm setting myself up for failure for having like a big kickoff and then it's just like, And every year after that's kind of disappointing. But we'll fight that battle if we get there, right? But that's just something I haven't forgot about it. I haven't been working on it like I probably should have been, and I apologize for that. All right, so we got Warrior Class and Catherine Dreyer and David Dwyer and Voodoo Queen in the live chat so far, and then there's other people who aren't chiming in, and that's fine. Okay, I'm sorry. Catherine Dreyer says he ran as Libertarian in 2016 for the presidency. He ran for U.S. Senate as a Republican. That's right. He even asked all his supporters if they would be fine with him from changing from the Libertarian Party to the Republican Party because he thought it might give him a little better shot at winning. Unfortunately, he was going up against people like Claire McCaskill. Ugh. So that's vomit-inducing in and of itself. But yeah, he was running against the likes of people like her. I don't remember who the big one was on the Republican side, but anyway, Josh Hawley. So Hawley was the other one he was having to contend with. So he had to contend with the two biggest blowhards on it from both parties, which isn't that's no small task. But anyway, that's a little bit of the history of Mr. Peterson. We are hoping that we can collaborate with him for Coolidge Days. It would be one hell of a kickoff. And I'm not going to lie, it would help this show. It could help other shows like this. Like if we could promote other shows and other groups at this event, and having someone like Austin Peterson there could be a heck of a way to boost the numbers of shows like this, off the cuff, maybe Tom's show on KSGF, all these things. It could be a nice boost for a lot of us, kind of small fry in the radio and podcast world. So that's another benefit. Now, again, I want to do it because I want to promote a president who was actually cool and not a douche canoe, if I can say that. But anyway, that's just some news. I will be trying to get a hold of Park Board very soon and finding what dates, because I want the last Saturday of April or the first Saturday of May are the two Saturdays that I'm looking for. And so we'll see what's available, because by that time the weather should be warming up. It should be nicer days. It shouldn't be hot as Hades outside. We should all be able to be comfortable in an outdoor environment celebrating a president that, again, wasn't a complete and total douche canoe. So with that being said, this is a free-for-all Friday, and happy to see you all here. We're just going to talk about anything that comes to mind tonight. I'm not going to speak at length on this, but I do, just so everyone's aware. Excuse me. Also another announcement. I am going to try like heck to move to the weekend shift next weekend. If I can do that, which I will announce it next week how things are going to go. If I can do that, Brandon and I have already discussed this. We will do another show next Friday. But then the 31st, we won't do one. We will wait until the first Tuesday of February. And then we'll have Tom on for the first, and possibly a good possibility of Catherine being on with us, to do our first legislative show with our two other, I'll just call them co-hosts. And that'll be the first Tuesday of every month. So that is also something that we'll be looking at if I can move to the weekend shift next weekend. Now, just to put this out there, you can go look this up. So Kehoe took office and he wrote six executive orders as soon as he got the powerful pen in his hand and could write stupidity on a piece of paper. Those are one of the things that we will talk about that first show. I don't know enough, and I didn't take the time to dig through to talk about it tonight. I just didn't have enough time to do it, and I was just like, well, and I told Tom this morning, I think it was this morning, that we could push that till our first show in Tuesday. So, yeah, World Class Theory says Josh Hawley stands with Israel. Too bad he doesn't stand with Americans. Yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. But anyway, that's some upcoming things to keep an ear open for, especially the new date that we will live stream and record will be on Tuesdays, hopefully within about the next couple of weeks, and that'll be our new date, Tuesday night, same time, 6:30 p.m. And then the first Tuesday of every month, Tom, possibly Catherine, will be on to do a legislative review of bills coming through or that we find here in Missouri that are going through the chambers in Jefferson City, and so that's the plan. And let's hope we can stick to the plan and nothing else stupid happens. Brandon, what you got, bro?
Oh, I think you might need to work on your Caesar Milan. You work on your for your dogs. You need to work on your yip, yip. Get those suckers walking right next to you when you go outside. When you call, they better come running. No,
you're not wrong.
I saw this article a couple days ago. It says Missouri Republicans look to eliminate the state income tax. This article is out of the Fox 2 Now, which is the St. Louis area's Fox affiliate. It's written by Emily Manley, and I'll just start reading, and if you got a comment or something, you go ahead and stop me. Missouri's new governor said he wants to cut the state's income tax, and a group of Republican lawmakers are working to make that possible. The current income tax rate in Missouri is 4.7%, bringing in billions of dollars that we use to pay for state services. Those behind this measure said eliminating the income tax will increase population and economic growth, but others are worried this will only benefit those who make the highest income. Quote, my administration will focus on reducing taxes and cutting regulations so families keep more of their own money and so job creators want to come here, expand here, and hire more hardworking Missourians, end quote, Governor Mike Kehoe said during his inaugural address. I'm going to go ahead and stop right there for just a second and say, sounds good so far, right? Sounds, I agree with what he's saying so far. Inspired by the new governor, Bishop Davidson out of Republic said that he feels reducing taxes is a must. Quote, we are constantly growing. Our economy is constantly growing. Our revenues are constantly growing. Over time, it trends upward, Davidson said. The problem is that our government spending is outgrowing that pace. If we could keep our spending to a linear growth, we could capture excess, we could capture our growth, and we could use it to buy down our rate, end quote. The plan would be slowly reduce the rate to zero and put a strict spending cap on lawmakers by linking the state budget to population growth, meaning if the population grows by 1%, then the state budget could increase. That's all the state budget could increase from the previous year. Quote, Missourians can feel confident about this plan because we're utilizing our growth to buy down our rate, and we're doing that with our tax reform fund, Davidson said. Davidson is sponsoring House Joint Resolution 1, which limits spending and establishes a fund to be used to fund budgetary shortfalls. The tax reform fund is funded by any revenue above anticipated spending. And once it reaches $120 million, the lawmakers could cut the top income tax rate by 0.1% and then another 0.05 percentage points for every additional $60 million available. We want to make sure that if we're cutting income taxes, and we're doing it in a way that's responsible and that doesn't negatively affect the budget, that doesn't negatively affect the services that we provide to Missourians, Davidson said. Democrats agree with Republicans that life is too expensive for Missourians, but they don't believe that this is the right way to go about it. Quote, it is important to remember that the proposals coming out of our caucus include things like ending sales tax on groceries, the things that hit families every single day. House Minority Leader Ashley Ahn of Kansas City said, quote, what's important to us, not giving tax cuts to the folks who need it the least, end quote. Over the past decade, lawmakers have cut state income tax rates multiple times, including back in 2022. That legislation lowered the top state income tax rate from 5.3% to 4.95% in 2023, and then the rate would drop to 4.5 if Missouri continues to experience revenue growth. If this legislation is approved, voters would have the final say. Your thoughts, John?
Well, I'm looking at now. I don't know what. Okay, so this is fiscal year 2023, and this is a site called KFF, right? And it's total state expenditures per capita. So let's look at a state like Texas. Okay, their fiscal year of 2023, they spent $4,462 per person. Okay, this is per capita. That's Texas. Florida, $5,199 per capita. Missouri, $6,149. So we are spending $1,000 more than Florida and $1,700 more than Texas. So what is Missouri spending all of its money on? And again, you have to remember, folks, within 5 years, our budget has went from $25 billion to now almost $52 billion. It has doubled in about 5 years. What is going on? And remember, now we're still dealing with inflation. I don't mean to say that inflation is gone now because Biden fixed it all with his Inflation Act crap that he tried to talk up all real good. But so when inflation's higher, tax revenues grow, and counties and cities and states were like, oh my God, we got all this money coming in. The question is, did the states give any of that money back to the people? No, they didn't. They tripped all over themselves to figure out how to spend it. That's the most insulting part. They will literally, the newspapers and your senators and your representatives or your county administration or your city officials will tell you, they will be in the paper overjoyed about the amount of tax revenue coming in because of inflation. They're just seeing these tremendous growths in tax revenue. How many of them actually ponder, hey, can we give some of this money, especially at the state level, can we give some of this money back to the people who paid in on, and especially like state income tax? Can we do that? Now, in 2022, right towards the end of the session, someone proposed giving any household that had people in it that paid into the Missouri income tax. So it's like $500 a person or $1,000 a household, right? They would give them a rebate of money that came from the income tax because they had just seen this exponential growth in tax revenues, that someone proposed, hey, let's give everybody $1,000 a household. And it got killed because people were like, what about these people? And it's like, no, this is only for people who pay income tax into the state. If you don't, then there's no reason why you should get a rebate on money that wasn't captured by the state. And it just got killed. The bill died right there because I'm sure it was Democrats and some Republicans can't grasp that you should not give money to people out of something that they never paid into. You shouldn't just be like, oh, well, we can't be doing these anytime the government's like, oh, we're having a recession, so we'll print money and give it to you and we'll cause inflation. Now, this was revenue captured by the state from people's incomes that someone was willing to rebate some of that money. And they're like, people are like, well, the poor people aren't getting it. Well, if the poor people don't have income from an occupation, a job, a career path, and they're not paying anything into the state, why should they get money from the state? That's the constitutional way of doing it. The people that got a rebate are the only ones that paid into that fund out of their checks. What's the problem? Idiots who don't understand how state government is supposed to operate, those people are the problems. But yeah, so just a little bit of info on how much this state spends per capita compared to states with a lot higher population than we've got. And they're spending $1,000 or $1,700 less. That's a problem, folks. That's a big problem.
Well, who's at the top of that list? Just curious. My assumptions are going to be,
let's see.
left-leaning states, but
yeah, well, I'm sure you're not wrong. Let me find.
Because you bring up a good point. It's not about your budget. It's about your spend per capita. Much more important.
So shocking. Okay, so the highest. Oh, no. Let's see. The highest, I would have never guessed this, is Alaska, $21,485.
Is that? I'm just wondering if that has anything to do with the native population there. If there's like a high native population, so they have a lot of they would get a lot of benefits.
Arizona, yeah, I don't know. Arizona's second with 14,892. California is at 10,556. So they spend 11. That just is mind-boggling.
Or maybe they just pay people to live in Alaska. I wonder if that's a real thing.
I do know it used to actually kind of pay. I think they stopped the program, but used to, if you lived in Alaska, and from the money, I believe it was made from the money selling oil because of the drilling around that area, that every year the people would get a check from the state because of revenues brought in by the sale of oil. And I think after a while it was, what is it? You got the permanent dividend fund. I got it when I lived in Alaska. That's what Catherine says. So yeah, you got a dividend fund from the sale of oil, and the state would give you a dividend check. And it wasn't like pennies. They were, I'm sure it wasn't tens of thousands of dollars, but you got a decent check from the state because of sale.
Right.
Okay, so Tom Mart says, remember, 0.1% was the largest tax cut in state history, and we still haven't achieved the number required for that to take effect. Oh, she said you have to have lived there for a year. Your kids also got it. It was $1,800 1 year. So your kids, everybody in your house got those checks. Yes. Now, the numbers that the state has to, Tom's right, the number that the state has to hit in tax revenue, that they have to hit that number before we get a tax cut, right? So they have to start, and they did, I guess, and Parson really patted himself on the back, I want to say last year, because all he did was, it was already automatic. All he did was he moved up the time frame when the state income tax cut came in. And then he's like, oh, look, I gave everybody a tax cut. It was going to happen. He just made it happen sooner. He just went in he wanted to give himself an attaboy. And he almost broke his own neck trying to pat himself on the back. But yeah, that's what Parson did. I want to say last year. He's like, oh, yeah, I got everybody a tax cut because blah, blah, blah. It's like, it was going to happen. We hit a number, this magical number, and it was going to drop. You just moved the timeline up a little bit, and now you want everybody to fall down at your feet and worship you like you're some kind of deity or something. I don't know. It's what a horse's ass. But anyway, now Kehoe's going to do the same thing. But here's the thing, folks. Here's the thing. Do you ever hear these people seriously? Because every Republican that comes into that office says, we want to cut spending, we want a balanced budget, we want tax cuts, and they don't ever do it. And you notice that most of the time it's a very generalized overview. It's the talking point that they put out. Most of them don't ever give you a detailed plan of how they want to cut it. They'll throw out some numbers, but it's a very generalized. It's this hip hip hooray, a Republican one, and then their typical talking point of we're going to cut taxes, or we're going to cut spending, and then every year Parsons said the same friggin' thing, and then what happened? The next year the budget would increase by $1 billion, and it's like, what happened to the cutting of spending? Did you guys all of you develop amnesia after you got elected? Did you all hit your head on something and like, I didn't say anything about tax cuts. Like, I feel like we should record it when they say it and then just call every rep and go, oh, did you forget? And then play them the recording back over the phone when you like leave them a voicemail. Like, hey, did you hit your head and forget that you said this? And then just play the record. Now, it's not going to fix anything, but it would just be funny to mess with their heads and like, oh my God, people are actually remembering the words I said and blah, 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 blah. And they'd probably have to be like Plocker and have a liquor cabinet installed in their office and start drinking more heavily than they possibly already do. So it's hard to say. But yes, it's the same as somebody's already mentioned this in the live stream. I think Catherine said it. It's the same tired thing they say every year. We're going to balance the budget. We need to balance the budget. We need to cut taxes. We need to cut spending. We need to get it, government under control. And then like Parson, oh, we got a couple $1 billion. Let's add a lane to I-70 from St. Louis to Kansas City. And you're like, when did we did you forget about the cutting spending? I get it. I-70 is a nightmare. I hate driving on I-70. I loathe it entirely. I can see maybe, but I would say if especially with the increase in gasoline tax and stuff, which is supposed to be for roads and bridges, why are we taking it out of the general revenue fund at $2 billion, I think, to add the lanes? I thought this is what all these gasoline taxes and stuff are for, but nope, because they lie to our faces constantly. They say one thing and do something else. I don't know. We should be used to it by now. That's the only thing I can say. We should all be used to this horse crap by now.
So, sorry. Tom brings up a good point because I guess I wasn't fully processing exactly what he was talking about when I was reading this. So, the state has to have basically a budget surplus of $120 million to cut the top income tax rate by 0.1. It doesn't say whether that includes the lower tax brackets going down the same percentage. It says the top income tax rate.
Yeah, and I think that's the way it's been set up a lot, is the top certain percentage of people get a tax cut when they hit that magic number, which I get it, folks. It's a tax cut, but it's unconstitutional because anybody that pretty much goes to work in this state pays state income tax, and you're not seeing a tax cut. If you're saying these people get a tax cut, the rest of you don't, unconstitutional tax cut. It is, because it's supposed to be applied equally. So that tax cut, unless I'm wrong, maybe other people are getting, like lower tax brackets are getting a less of a cut. But if it's only for the top earners and it's not for all people in Missouri who pay a state income tax, then that tax cut is unconstitutional. Do I want to see tax cuts? Yes. Yes, I do. I want to see them. But I don't know. It's just, but that really irritates people when you say that. Like, that's unconstitutional. Like, well, it's a tax cut. Don't you want tax cuts? Yes, I want tax cuts for everyone across the board.
Start with the lowest earners. Like, it's not like you're giving a handout to people who refuse to work. Give the tax cuts to the workers who make the least amount of money first. That just makes the most logical sense. Like, I understand that the people at the top are creating jobs, but the people at the bottom are the ones who need the money the most. So, just in logical thinking, if I was going to give someone a break, it would be the workers who make the least amount of money first, right? Like, isn't that where your brain goes first?
It would be. It would just be like if I was going to institute a policy like this, I'm going to say, like, okay, everybody's going to get a tax cut. The thing is we're going to roll this out over the next 2 months. The first people to see the income tax cut will be the lowest, wage earners, and then we will work from that way up to the top earners.
Yeah.
But everybody's still going to get the tax cut. It just, I might reverse the order and start with the lowest wage earners and work my way to the top wage earners, or, whoever. Because I don't want to be like Democrats and go, them damn billionaires don't deserve anything. They're rich, greedy, capitalist pigs, and we don't want to give them anything. No, if they're paying into the income tax, they should also get a tax cut if we're going to create a tax cut. In Missouri, we like our tax credits, which are unconstitutional. We like a lot of programs that are instituted that are unconstitutional and are just unfair and a waste of people's time and money. But it's still, you're right. If I was going to start it and I was going to institute it across the board, then it might be a month rollout. Like the first week, the lowest wage earner bracket gets it, and then the next 2 weeks it's the upper lower, the higher earners on the lower class, then the middle class, and then the upper class. The upper class would be the last to see the tax cut, but it would be instituted across all tax brackets, all income brackets, whatever.
Not that you would want to just cut the taxes for the
right.
for the low income earners. It's that if you're going to start somewhere, why would you start with the top income earners and work your way down versus starting with the people with the lowest income and working your way up? Seems, I don't know, wrong now, in my opinion. But I'm not a tax expert, though.
But here's the thing, Brandon. You and I are thinking this way, right? The way that, and this is, if Republicans really actually gave a crap and wanted it to change their image, right? Then the thing they would do is institute a tax cut for everybody, and they would start with the bottom wage earners. Where do they start? They start with the top. And so then the media gets a hold of this, and it just, right in everybody's face. Look, they only care about the rich. And it's like, well, Democrats, you do too. You just hide it better, I guess. But if they wanted to improve their image a little bit, A, if they wanted to be more constitutional and give everybody a tax cut, but B, if they wanted to not be seen as only working for the rich, then that's the way they would institute that tax cut, from the bottom up. They don't do that. They just, well, you got to figure in this state, who gives the most to the PACs? It's the wealthy. The wealthy have the lobbyists helping create these laws. So, of course, the top are going to get it first, and then the bottom are going to get it. It's because of all the HRCC and all the lobbyist money that comes in. That causes a lot of these problems because, let's face it, most of them are beholden to lobbyist money. So it's the natural progression of things. And so I want to go back to talking about what I learned over the last couple of days, this HOP program that I was in classes for, because it does, when I was thinking about it, when I was absorbing all this information, listening to all this, I was literally equating a bunch of it to government. Because one of the main things that I took away is they're like, when someone institutes a policy within the company and they're trying to improve this or that, and I even said it. I was like, so what we're basically trying to do is instead of basing a new system or a change to the system and basing it on intent, we need to look at the outcome of the new thing you added to the system. Like, you actually need to gauge what the outcome is and not the intent. Because intent and outcome are not just done in legislatively. You can see this in a lot of things in life. Like, you do things because as humans, we are quick to, we see a problem, let's fix it, right? And it's not necessarily thought out, and a lot of outside people coming in to try to help you sort through to get the best possible outcome. It's intent based. A lot of us are guilty. I've been guilty of it. A lot of us have been guilty because we're quick to resolve an issue. That is human nature. Oh my God, we got a problem, let's fix it. Without studying it and letting it soak in, and then getting, especially if you're looking at a problem that affects other people's, you're not getting feedback from those people. You're just sitting there like, well, and the thing that you've experienced your whole life and the way you've been taught is you see a problem, get in there and fix it, and then now you can pat yourself on the back and say you fix it. So it's everything's so much is intent based and not outcome based. So it was an interesting class, and again, I just kept equating everything and lining this up with how governments operate, and with a system, and but yeah, it's one of those things where instead of focusing on the individual, right, you look at the system and see how things operate from in that system. And so when you think about, we talk about, and what was so cool is somebody brought up education. I think my old boss was sitting there. He's like, you got to remember, education teaches people this. And some dude sitting across the room goes, remember what Rockefeller said? I want a nation of workers, not thinkers. When it's talking about education, I was like, oh, that's super badass. Like that's so awesome. I'm so glad somebody else said that and I don't look like the only tinfoil hat wearing person in the room. But it when you look at the system that we have as far as government goes, it just breeds corruption. And education system breeds government worship and conformity. And so, yeah, it's easy to, again, we look at individual reps, and which we should rightfully do, because sometimes they write a bill and you're like, oh my freaking God, like what is your problem? But these people probably think this is what they're supposed to do, because education and everything else has taught them this is the way you operate. So the system is sometimes we get so focused on the individual that we don't look at the system that they're operating in. I don't know. It was so fascinating to me. It's like the only seminar I've been into in a long time, besides one for bargaining, that I wasn't bored to tears and was ready to shove my head into a ceiling fan to make it stop. So anyway, I just wanted to interject that before we go on to any other topics. But yeah, the whole HOP thing is pretty fascinating to me. And I think one other thing I'm hoping helps me, especially when I'm looking at governmental things, right, is instead of coming in with questions that focus the blame on a person or a thing, it teaches you to operate as starting out as wide angle as you can. Give me the breakdown of what you're doing, right? And then you ask questions that get you to a point where you actually see the problem, instead of going, well, this is this and that's it. Okay, what started all this? So starting out with a wide angle and then narrowing your focus, and then working on the problem within that, and seeing the problem, the actual problem, not the problem that you think because we have these biases built in. I have them. Everybody has them when they look at especially when they look at government. You have biases built in. So you step out, you take a wider angle look, and then as you ask questions and you work your way towards, you actually find out what the actual problem is and not the one you think it is. And I have been guilty of this a lot with backing of certain candidates and people, until I decided to take a wide angle look at things. And I don't know, it's just, it was just a fascinating. I'm a nerd. I can't help it. So that's that.
I'll agree with you that the voters could definitely benefit from more thinking like that, because then they'll start to realize that, the HRCC and the DRCC and their Senate affiliates, and that the system in a whole is what produces these terrible politicians. But I'll push back a little bit or disagree, I guess, in a sense that the politicians know what they're doing. It's not that the politicians aren't looking. I mean, maybe I'm just cynical at this point, but the politicians aren't looking at they're looking at the wide scope of things. They're like, how could I benefit myself the most by what I'm doing? So they give a tax break to their donors and they sell it to the average person as an income tax cut for everybody. But in reality, it's going to take a very long time if we have to come up with billions of dollars to get a 1% tax cut. I know the tax rate's only at 5.3% for the upper rate, but if you're talking about, that's what you said, we're going to eliminate the income tax, but we have to have billions of dollars to decrease that rate by 1%. Like, I don't know. I just don't trust our government to cut our spending and to give us a budget surplus of billions of dollars into this. What was it called? What did they call it? The tax reform fund. Like, I just don't trust that system. And I believe that the politicians know what they're doing. Like, they know this. They know that it's going to take forever to take effect, and it's only going to affect the top income earners for a long time. So, but I totally agree with your point, is that if the voters looked at the wide scope of why the problems were actually happening, we'd probably have a few more libertarians running around the planet. But also, that the voters would understand that which parts of the system in particular were corrupting all of these politicians.
Yeah, I guess I should add to my comment, and maybe I should rephrase, because I see what angle you're coming in from. Maybe I should say the newer people that come in aren't. Now, once they're in, especially when you get into D.C. and you're there for 30 freaking years, and you're fully engulfed, and you've been fully enshrined into whatever nonsense goes on there. Yeah, after a while, you know exactly what you're doing. I think some people, like especially at the state level, they may go in with good intentions, and then the corruption ensues, or they're basing what they're doing off of the way they've been taught. Like, this is how government solves problems. Even though they say they're small government, they're really not. They believe they are. But then you start seeing bills they write, and you're like, that's not very small government. So I think the people that have been in there a while, and they're the career people, absolutely. They know exactly what they're doing. And some newbies want that power. They want that taste of power. They want to lord over other people, and they definitely know what they're doing. But I think some people actually get in, and they want to do something good, but they're not paying attention to the document they swear the oath to on their first day in office. And so it leads them to do unconstitutional big government things. And so, but again, that's a system they were raised in. Their parents probably didn't know that government is supposed to be this very limited thing, and you're not supposed to do these things. Government's not supposed to come in and solve all your problems. Like, hey, you said you're small government, you're a liberty guy, you want to balance budget, you want to lower taxes, but you're not doing a very good job. But your parents didn't teach you this. The schools didn't tell you this. And so they just go in with like this false idealism on how they're supposed to govern. And they're going into it wrong. And that's the thing. You get as many people as I've interviewed, and some of the ones that we have both interviewed, Brandon, you can hear it. We don't say anything. We ask them questions, and we let them hang themselves, right? We give them a rope. They're going to hang themselves. They'll hang themselves. But you can hear it when you interview them. Generally, you're like, oh, that's not very small government. I don't say anything. I'm like, I let the people decide. The people in their district, you want to vote for this person, have at it, feel free. But if you interview them and you know how to frame your questions or what questions to ask, you'll hear those big government tendencies roll right off their tongue. They have no idea. They think what they're doing is limited government. And you're like, in our heads, we're like, that's not limited government. You sound like a fool right now. Because you just said you're a Republican, and that means small, limited government and lower taxes and balanced budget and cutting spending. And then you're sitting here talking about creating a program. Bro, stop hitting the glass pipe and listen to what you're saying right now. So it's not, that's the other thing, folks. As voters, if you know what to listen for, it's not hard to hear when you interview most of them. If you know all the key words and phrases that they throw out, it's not hard to hear that and to discern that they're telling you they want to do these things, but the answers they're giving is not relating to what they're saying, or it all sounds canned. And then you hear the canned responses like, oh, somebody told you to say that. You're not going to govern very well when you get in the office because you don't even sound like you can think for yourself right now. So, and that's just my experience from all the interviews I've done. Like, you can hear it and you're like, I don't, and Brandon, this is like 2 years before you ever, like, your first interview with me. I was told by a guy, I believe it was a Bill Eigels chief of staff or campaign manager or whatever he was. He gave me the names of people to interview. He's like, oh, these people are great. They're, small government. I asked him about the war on drugs. I got almost the same identical response. Well, drugs damage. I know families that drugs have damaged and really hurt and blah. It was the same thing over and over, every person. And I'm like, that's not a well thought out response to my question. You've heard a Republican talking point and you're saying that because you think that's what people want to hear. I don't want to hear that crap. And my listeners, for the most part, also don't want to hear that crap. But I just let them hang themselves. But when I got done with the show, I'm like, that doesn't sound very small government to me.
Yeah, I just don't think. I mean, I'm just gonna, in my opinion, I feel like a very small percentage of these elected, like the ones that actually win their House races, and not even. I guess you could be right that a lot of incoming people may have a little bit more of like true. In the spirit of wanting to do the right thing. But I think by a lot of these people's second terms, they're just playing the game. They're like, I could advance my own. Like, I'll win re-election if I say those talking points to John Williams on his show. Like, if I go on there and talk about the war on drugs and how bad drugs are, then you're going to get a little pat on the head from John Patterson. You're going to get your money from the HRCC, and you're going to get to go back in next time because you played the game. Like you said, I'm very interested to see in this new cycle if we have any incoming freshman legislators who are actually willing to vote not just conservative but actual constitutional. I'm really interested to see how Bryant Wolfen votes on a lot of things, just because we had him on the show and he was one of the most open politicians I've ever heard speak. I mean, he was telling us about about their game, about, the donations game at the summer caucus. He was telling us, all of the insider secrets that you're really not supposed to probably say out loud.
Yeah, he's probably going to get primaried.
Yeah, that would be the saddest thing. But no, what I'm really hoping is that, like, he doesn't want to just advance, because sometimes if you just want to advance in this game, which is purely like I want to climb the ranks and I want to eventually run for U.S. House later in life or whatever, then you have to play the game. And you can make the game sound really good. They oftentimes do. Like, we're going to end income tax and all this other stuff. I just don't think that in my opinion, I don't think very many state reps have this, like, I'm here to do the right thing. I think a lot more of them are self-centered, just in my opinion.
Well, and again, we've heard that, so the state rep will come in and they'll want to, they got some decent legislation they want to get through. But they're told, we saw this with a school choice bill in the 2023 session. If you don't vote yes for this bill, your bill's are dead right now. Like, after today, after this vote, if you got a no vote, your bills, we're going to drop them like a bad habit. And so, again, the HRCC, the lobby money. And again, if you're really principled about freedom, I would think that your first response is like, well, I guess my bills are dying. And I'm going to tell them exactly why my bills died. Because you guys are bullying us and threatening us because we won't play your game, that you won't let my bills go through. So we'll just let people know. If we had more principled people with a spine, maybe those things wouldn't happen. But a lot of them, they want. And again, you and I have discussed this many times, Brandon, is the fact that people, for whatever reason, are judged. Their service in the House or the Senate is judged by how many bills did you write, not how many bad bills did you help defeat. So how many bills have you written? So they just feel like, I think that's another like misnomer there, or some misguided thing. Bad information. And it's also it also shows how the ignorance of the voters. That if you're in there, and just because you're not writing bills, which could very well be unconstitutional or take someone's liberties away, and you're in there fighting against the bad bills, that somehow you're just not good enough because you didn't write bills. That's another problem. So you have that. You have ignorant voters saying, well, this guy didn't write any bills and he's useless or whatever. And then his opponent's going to bring out the fact this guy didn't write any bills. He didn't put any bills forth. What a loser. What do you do? Sit on his butt all day in his chair and not do anything? And so you have that. And then you have entities like the HRCC saying, if you don't vote yes on this, your legislation, everything that you've put forth, no matter where it's at, is dead. It's DOA now. We're done with you. For the rest of the session, your bills are all just, we could put them in the incinerator. Who knows? You have all those things. But again, you have to have the principles to say, well, I guess my bills are going to die. And then you have to be willing to go back to your constituents and say, I wanted to do these things, but we have an entity in Jeff City that doesn't want me to do those things. They find this awful bill more pressing than getting your liberties back and getting smaller government back. They would rather, these things are more focused on. Now, again, is that going to get you in trouble with the HRCC? Are they going to fight really hard to primary you? Yes. But you are, in fact, doing your due diligence and your duty to report back to your constituents that these things are going on. And you're having an open and honest conversation about it. And you're being forthright with the voters. That will gain you some respect. And it may get you voted in again because you're willing to say the difficult things. Now, some people are like, oh, this guy's a conspiracy theorist and he's making up stuff and he's making excuses. But some people will be intelligent enough to say, oh, wow, we had no idea that was going on. Even if you get the conversation started amongst your voters, why are they doing this? I think that is a good thing. Yeah, you might lose your next election, but you've started a conversation. And that's the important. You've started a dialogue of educating the voters, even if it's just a small percentage. That's more than you had when you started your run for office. And that, to me, that would just be great. Now, do I think that's going to happen for most of them? No. I'm hoping Wolfen is the guy. Like, we know Mike Moon's the guy. Now, on the House side, Wolfen would be, it says, go home to the voters and exclaim that all your liberty constitutional legislation was squashed by leadership. It's
it should be an easy sell. It's
Yeah.
like you could just say, I introduced the legislation. That's the most I can do. Like, did you want me to make a bunch of bad backdoor deals? Like, sign 5 bad bills into law to get your one good bill through? It's a bad trade almost every time. So, yeah. And it's why things like the Freedom Caucus could be so much better. Like, if the Freedom Caucus, in theory, could be the group of Republicans who just says, if you're not going to pass our, like instead of having to compromise in that way, you have the power. Like, if more people are in the Freedom Caucus, like, if enough Freedom Caucus members vote with Democrats to shut down the bills that these establishment Republicans want to do, because the Democrats want to fight Republicans as much as they can in almost every level. So if the Freedom Caucus would actually flex their power and actually stand for the things that they say they stand for, then you could generate a lot more support for your good bills and less support for the bad ones. But I feel like a lot more of the times they just cave instead of trying to flex the power. The Democrats at the So when Nancy Pelosi was running for Speaker of the House, there was like the big push for the squad and the more progressive Democrats to do what the Republicans did a couple of years later. And they wanted them to force AOC to put Green New Deal on the to force a vote on the Green New Deal. And Nancy Pelosi bullied the squad members and especially AOC into voting for her confirmation with no guarantees and no backups. Like there was no, without any promises. Now, the Freedom Caucus at the U.S. House level actually got concessions, like there was a pretty low minimum number of people needed to put the speakership to a vote, like to basically oust a speaker, which is why they ousted Kevin McCarthy. So like your Freedom Caucus and the Freedom Caucus in Missouri could do a lot of good things and could curb a lot of the problems we see just by putting up the real fight. And that's how you can tell that some of the guys in the Freedom Caucus, like Nick Schroer, he's in the Freedom Caucus, I'm pretty sure. And so when those are the people who are supposed to be like on your team fighting your fight, you know, it loses all momentum of the Freedom Caucus. You're basically just HRCC light at this point.
That's really what it is. Is if you look at most of the membership, you're like, how did you get into the Freedom Caucus? It's because they say the right things. I want to say that the Freedom Caucus is also headed up by, or one of the tops in that, and Catherine or Tom could tell me for sure, is that's former Speaker Tim Jones's outfit. Well, Tim Jones ain't worth a hoot either. Not real freedom guy. He likes to proclaim he is, and he likes to pat himself on the back and go, yeah, Tim Jones. So Speaker Tim Jones, that's his outfit. So the only person who didn't get an invite that should have gotten the invite, especially at the national level, Mike Moon. Now, Mike Moon, somebody approached him about it, joining, and he's like, listen, if they don't want me, if they didn't want to me in there, if they wanted me in there, should have asked me. He's like, I am not joining now. So at the national level, Mike Moon, the most constitutional voting member of either chamber in Jefferson City, does not get invited to the Freedom Caucus. And so that should, let's see, and Tom says, if it helps, Wolfen will be attending my MoCon class in March in Cape Girardeau, and he and I have had several conversations. He says he'll keep an open line of communication with me, and I'm open to it. So that is, I agree, Catherine.
That's good news.
That is great to hear. So we could have, I shouldn't be, but this is how few people are that constitutional in Jefferson City. We could have a version of Mike Moon on the House side. And, instead of me just saying we could have a freedom guy we could have another freedom person on the House side. I have to say things like we could have another Mike Moon type person, except instead of the Senate, he's on the House side. That's how few of them they are that they utter one name of all the members of the House and Senate. I utter one name generally that, and Catherine says, depending on how he does this session, he may be someone to speak at Coolidge Days. Abso-freaking-lutely. I would love to have Bryant Wolfen show up. If he does what he says he's going to do, or if he does 85% of what he says he's going to do, I would absolutely love to have Bryant show up and talk. And he could be, especially to my area, instead of the one goofball we got now who only seems to worry about conservation stuff, he could be a great person to show up and say, and then point to him and go, you want a good rep? That's a good rep. Not the schmuck that we got, not Sassman that we have now that, he just goes and sticks his finger in the air and sees which way the political winds are blowing and votes that way, or only comes up when they, which way ever leadership says. Now, Tom says, Mike also said when they become more constitutional, he'd be happy to be part of the Freedom Caucus, which, if they suddenly would do a 180 and start acting constitutional, he's like, hey, can I can I join you guys now? Because this is awesome. But yes, he's probably, I'm thinking from Tom's statement here, he's looking at them like we're looking at them. There's not a whole lot of freedom here, guys. What are we doing?
I still think that the big part of that too, the big problem with the Freedom Caucus is that they still need the money to run and win primaries. Like I mean, if you don't play ball at least a little bit, they're going to try to come at you and primary you in some way, and they won't give you the money that you want to run again. So I think that's why you see the concessions that you get from the Freedom Caucus is because they still have to play the game too. I mean, you can be on the better, like, you know, towards the better end, but the system's the system, and if they've got you, they've got you.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Again, you have to have people who are principled to say, okay, and you know, and be principled and be strong-willed and backbone enough to go back to your district and say, do you guys want to really know what's going on here? I'm not going to blame a particular person. I'm going to tell you the system that I have to operate in, and this is what is making it so hard for me to get things done that actually are good for your liberty. This is why. And if you could get, again, a very tough road to hoe because people don't want to lose in their next campaign, you know, so you're kind of putting your position above the principle that you supposedly are, you know, your belief and your belief system is founded in these so-called freedom principles, and you're still putting your campaign above the freedom principles. I get it. You want to stay in, you want to try to do good things. But if you're not coming back to your district and saying, this is what I have to fight with, this is what I have to contend with every day, these are things that are going on, and not just saying John Patterson is the whole problem, because that would be a partial truth. But there's so much more there's so much more underlying truths that aren't getting spoken. And again, it's real easy for me to say this because I'm just some guy behind a microphone. It's not my position I'm talking about. I'm not an elected representative. I go to work 5 days a week, right? So it's easy for me to say this. But if we're going to be straight up about it, these are things that have to happen. If we want an improvement, and we actually have people like Bryant Wolfen, and he actually does what he says he's going to do, and he's the most constitutional person in the House side, I would love to see Bryant come back home and say, folks, I'm really trying. This is the fight that I have right now. I want you to understand the system that I am trying to work within to do good things, and at least maybe spark a conversation. But yeah, I don't know. It's any way you slice it, it is not an easy task. And again, as we all say, we didn't get here in one day, and we're not going to eliminate this problem. We're not going to fix these things in one day. But it's just the truth. You know, I know that there are a lot of people that say, you know, you have an easier time of fixing things in the state, at the state level, rather than the federal level. I'm not saying there's no truth in that, but the system that's in place right now in Jefferson City is eerily close to D.C. So getting things done at the state level are made much, much harder because of the system that they're all operating within. So I don't know how, you know, again, I don't want people to lose faith and not try. That's not what I'm saying. But it's also much harder than some people lead them to believe it is. It is much harder. Again, as long as it took for the Second Amendment Preservation Act to get done, that was years of fighting. Anything else, anything liberty-loving that comes along is also going to generally face the same multi-year battle trying to build enough of a coalition and putting enough pressure on these people. And you literally, this is the most insane part, guys, to me. You literally have to pressure enough representatives to cave to freedom-loving legislation. Think about that. You have to pressure enough representatives to fight to get it to pass liberty legislation. You don't have to fight very hard for stuff that infringes more on your natural rights, but you have to fight like hell to get liberty things done. That's how much of a cesspool the system in. If we were working in a better system, the liberty legislation should be a no-brainer. But we're having to fight harder to get liberty legislation done than crap, junk, natural right stomping bills. Those could pass like that every day. Oh, you want another one? You'd like to lose some more rights? Say no more. I've already got it written right here. The ink's just drying off the printer. Let me go take this to the speaker and we'll get this done for you. So that's the problem. That's the worst thing to me, is you have to fight like mad to get liberty legislation done, not just at the federal level, but in the state of Missouri. And that is a demoralizing thought. But it doesn't mean you give up. It just tells you what kind of hell you have to battle through to get something productive and good done here in the state of Missouri.
Well, also, like, if you've got kids and grandkids, then you know that if you don't fight the fight gets harder for your kids. Like, if we don't come on this podcast and try to spread awareness, if we don't call our congressman, if we don't, put in our effort for liberty, then when our kids need liberty, or when the tyranny gets worse under them, that fight is going to be even harder for them. So yeah, it's up to us to continue fighting, no matter how rough the system looks. You have to continue fighting, for sure.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm not going to lie, getting on here once a week is cathartic. It's therapeutic. I get to come on and I get to vent my spleen, right? And it does help me, because the frustration, it gets to you. You're like, what are we doing? But you're absolutely right, Brandon. And I've kind of just I haven't lost sight of it, but I just don't bring it up enough, is the fact that, yes, you've got a little one. I've got one grandkid and another one on the way. And I have to continue this battle for them, because most of us would like our kids to grow up in a freer society than we grew up in. We want, when you're raising your kids, you want them to grow up better and have it better than you did when you were growing up, or as you're working every day and going to work. You want them to have it better. You want them to excel. You want them to do better in life. Well, we should also think about that on the liberty side of things. We want them to not have so much of their wealth stolen from them by central planners. And we want them to be able to own as many firearms as they want. We want them to be able to do all these things. So yes, if Brandon and I just shut our mics off and went, that helps no one. That helps absolutely no one. And so yes, we do have to continue this fight for liberty, and we've got folks like Sam and Trish. I was talking about my friends here, Sam and Trish Britton. Again, I have to give them major props, because they have helped me not just to learn about liberty stuff and get me started on the road. They were the first to ever give me a spot for my voice to be heard on their network. So that's awesome, right? I mean, that's amazing that they did that. But then again, as I progressed down this road, I met some incredible people. I met Patrick. I met Catherine. I met Tom. I met Robert. I've met Brandon. I met Brian Wolfen and Mike Moon. And just because it's like when you're, I don't know how to really explain it without sounding kind of weird, but when you're trying to do the right thing, it's almost magical, or it's almost like destined. It's like it will lead you, and you could be just losing hope. I remember my first show I ever did was on the radio, and I'd be like, why am I doing this? And I kid you not, every time I would start to feel like maybe I just shut this thing down. A little tobacco store here in town, it just happened all the time. Somebody would come in and go, hey, you sound like so and so on the radio. I was like, yeah, that's me. Oh man, I love your show. That happened. And then when I started back up again, and it's just a few years of, interviewing a few people, whatever. But then suddenly I was like being invited to speak at campaign events. And then I met Tom at Robert Smith's campaign event. And then I met Catherine. And before them I met Patrick. And then as I've interviewed people, I've met other like-minded folks like Brandon, my co-host. So when you're doing the right thing, at some point, it seems like you'll get to your lowest point, or you start almost maybe not feeling burnout, but you're pushing towards the burnout part where you're like, am I making a difference? Is this worth it? Then
No, yeah.
you just suddenly meet someone else, and you're like, and it renews the spark. Yeah, Voodoo Queen, I met her at Eigel's event when he announced his exploratory run for governor. I met Voodoo Queen. I've met Warrior Class up in Jeff City. It's just been an amazing thing, and it continues to be amazing how, as we're doing what we do, Brandon, that suddenly out of the blue you meet somebody else and it sparks a conversation and it renews your hope in people. It reinforces what you want to do with this show, and it renews that effort to try to get the word out to just people in general as you meet them, and you have these random conversations. It is one of the coolest things that I have to rephrase that. It is the coolest thing I've been a part of. That I with the help of a lot of people, and now Brandon and I are slowly, the show is building. And we're building an audience, and if things continue to fall into place, then we continue to grow. And not only do we help ourselves, Brandon and I, but Tom March, who has a show on KSGF, and Sam and Trish Britton, who have their network. Maybe we can just spread the word and help everybody else who's helped us, or we've been fortunate enough to meet and include them in our lives and learn from them and do all these things. It's pretty awesome.
Oh yeah, it's kind of similar when I go to the Libertarian Party meetings, like when the county party meets, or you just meet up with like libertarians at like events. You just feel so like we're in this fight together. You're not like the more. I love the environment of like the libertarian, or just anyone, not necessarily libertarians, but anyone freedom oriented, anyone freedom minded on, from either side, from any political aisle or from wherever you're from. When you're fighting for liberty with them, it's so inspirational. Like I feel so inspired to like work on things and like fight for liberty just by hanging around the libertarians at the convention, or every time we get done with a show. Like the next day I'll be thinking about like, yeah, we need to do this and that. And then I'll start like typing something out or doing something. Yeah. It's inspirational being around people who are also fighting for freedom.
And Catherine says something, and I have to admit that I have a lot of, I don't have a lot of praise for myself, and I don't put a lot of faith in myself, and that's just something that I have to deal with. I'm not on here looking for a therapist. I'm just being honest with everybody. I don't have a lot of faith in myself. I beat myself up on a daily basis about how I've done certain things. I'm not my own best friend by any means. But Catherine says you got to stay in the fight no matter how discouraging it is. I've seen too many people walk away out of frustration, and I get it. It's an uphill battle. My thing is I've been doing this since, I want to say October of 2019 is when I started. And that was, oh my God, the Push for Liberty podcast, right? I started that up and started doing that. And it's not, to me, I'm my own worst enemy, and I look at something and I go, I don't want to sometimes like stop doing it out of frustration, because I feel like, I I'm trying to think how to word this. I get frustrated because I feel like I'm not doing a good enough job. Like I'm not intelligent enough to get the information out in a way that's good, that other people take it and they look into it and it sparks something in them. Like I feel like at times like I'm one of the worst messengers for liberty that I've ever met. And I mean, I'm not saying this to be, I mean, Brandon's smiling and sometimes I smile at it too. But I mean it wholeheartedly. Like when I get frustrated, it's not like, oh, I don't have 30,000 viewers every week and all that. It's not that. I just feel like, am I a good enough messenger for liberty to keep doing this? Or am I actually doing it a disservice by opening my fat trap every week and saying weird things? Like, that's literally the internal battle that I have. And I have people that come up like, oh, you do a really great job. And I'm like, I don't feel like I'm doing a great job. There's a lot of times like I could do way better at this. Like I feel like a turd at sometimes. Like I suck. And maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe I'm hindering instead of helping. So that's the internal struggle that I have. But I also enjoy, interacting with the live stream, people in the live stream and everything else, and talking to Brandon every week. And so there's a joy in it too. But if you take everybody out of it, and if I'm just in my own head, yeah, I am like Mike Tysoning the crap out of myself. And so that's the problem that I have to face. That's the dilemma that I have to get through and just go push on another week. Apparently you're not that bad because you don't have 0 viewers, like you don't come back and like, oh, one person saw my show. But I don't know. But this is one of the, especially this show now, I think it's the best thing that I've done as far as a podcast, a show. This is the best thing I've done. And again, meeting these people like Catherine and Tom and Brandon, Sam and Trish and Patrick and Voodoo Queen and Warrior Class and all these other people, that it reinvigorates you. And I'll be honest, I know you guys, you tell me I do a good job. I also, quite honestly, I am the worst at taking praise from people. And I don't do it to be a jerk. Okay, I don't do it to like, oh, these people are freaking weird. They come up to me telling me a good job. I have a very big fear of getting praise and then turning into a complete a-hole and letting my ego just grow. Let like my head swell up so big I can't fit through the door. And my ego gets big and I start treating people like I'm better than them. So if you give me some praise and I'm like, thanks, and I'm like, and I just want to go past it, that's why. I'm afraid of like enough people say it and I start feeling like, oh, I'm big time here. I'm like right under Rush Limbaugh. These people suck. And if I don't tell them things, they're going to be all stupid and they won't know. I don't want to be that person. I do appreciate the praise, but if I don't react in a way that you expect, it's because I don't want to become some egotistical maniac. And everybody goes, well, I'm not listening to that guy's show. People don't want to come on my show. Brandon's like, I don't know what happened to you if you became a raging alcoholic, but man, you've turned into a real D-bag. So let's tone it down or I have to leave the show. So I'm just being open and honest with all my listeners and viewers. That's the internal battle that I struggle with all the time, but we keep pushing through. Brandon and I make this content. We bring you the news. We bring you the information that we find fascinating. Hope you guys find it fascinating. And we just keep going.
See, I think I'm doing a great job.
Hey, you know what? Some people, I have to say this. Some people, when you see people, and it's not that they're arrogant, but they're self-confident in what they do. So they go, I think I do a pretty good job. And some people are like, wow, that's really arrogant. But is it arrogance or is it self-confidence? Because there's a fine line from like, hey, I'm really good at this and I'm going to keep doing it. And it's the way you phrase it. And I know you might have been joking, but dude, I want people to understand. So the graphics and everything that I'll pull up on the screen for you to see, I don't do that. Brandon does all that. He's technologically better at this. If I was doing it, you would just see black print on a white screen, and I would pull it up and zoom in so you could all see it. Brandon makes the nice graphics that come up on the screen. So I have to give him the credit for that. It would just be plain old Jane old black and white print. And Brandon makes it look snazzier. So I'm not so ashamed to I'm not ashamed at all to put his stuff up on the screen. When I do it, it's like, Jesus Christ, that's terrible. And then but I do it anyway so you all can see what I'm reading from. But yeah, Brandon does all these things, and he is a big help for me as far as gathering and getting the best like quotes out of like articles or whatever, or something he finds or one of us might find. He's great at developing these little graphics to put up on a screen. So I have to give him a lot of credit on that, because if it was just me, yeah, it would look pretty unprofessional. And I know most of you aren't here looking for like mainstream media looking stuff. But I'll be honest, I will start working harder on how the video looks to people, because unfortunately, and Brandon, I know you know this is right, the better presentation you have on screen, unfortunately, it's not always the information, it's also the visual. The more people that you gain, even though you could have the best message, but the worst visual presentation, and people just won't look at it because they can't stand to look at whatever like jumbled mess you've put on the screen. You're like, God, I can't even concentrate. So the better visually it looks, the more appealing it is, and the more people gather the message. And Brandon helps me a lot with that, so I have to give him a lot of thanks for that. Because again, if I was on my own, I would just put a picture of a dumpster fire and then my camera on the screen, like, that's me, I did that. And you all be like, yeah, that looks exactly what John would do right there. A dumpster fire. Anyway.
Oh, I appreciate that. Just, do what I can. Anyway, what do you think about this ceasefire? Have you heard it? Did you hear about it?
So I haven't looked at it. I just know that. So before you go into it, this is what I've heard. Like, supposedly, now I don't know how much of this to believe, because I know Trump is a huge Israel supporter, right? But supposedly his envoy went to Israel and said, hey, guys, you got to tone it down. You got to stop a lot of this nonsense. And then Biden gets on stage. He goes, hey, we've been working on this for 8 months, but we finally got this ceasefire done. But then you tell me something last night, so you go ahead and take it away, Brandon. I just wanted to start with that.
Oh, I'll just go from antiwar.com. So one of the big notes, this is from a couple paragraphs in. This is from Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. It says that the 3-phase ceasefire deal does not commit Israel to a permanent truce, and that the statement from the Likud party, which is like the controlling party in Israel right now, it's what Netanyahu and Ben-Gvir belong to. It says that it's the Likud signals that the U.S. has assured Israel that it could resume the war after the first phase, which is a 42-day ceasefire for initial hostage exchange. So it is a ceasefire in the very literal terms, is that as of tomorrow, because it says it doesn't take effect until Sunday, which is super weird to me. It's like, we've agreed to stop killing each other tomorrow. What kind of weird backwards logic is that? And so Biden announced this part of the ceasefire, part of his outgoing address. And both him and Trump are trying to take credit for it. So I'll tell you what Biden said. This is from AP News. My diplomacy never ceased in their efforts to get this done. This is the result not only of extreme pressure that Hamas has been under, but the changed regional equation after a ceasefire in Lebanon and weakening of Iran, but also dogged and painstaking American diplomacy. So Trump and Biden are both trying to take credit for this ceasefire. And Israeli media and a lot of people are acknowledging, like you said, that this was because of Trump's envoy going and saying, hey, we've got to get something done. And I'm not sure. Someone might have to fact check me on this because I heard this before I was coming on. That Trump had posted a video to his Truth Social, talking bad. Like it had some bad things. It was basically a video of Jeffrey Sachs, who's an amazing war analyst, and he actually used to be on like some of the mainstream networks, but he was too honest, so they had to take him off. But Trump had reposted on Truth Social a video of Jeffrey Sachs explaining how Israel has affected American foreign policy and why it's been so detrimental. And apparently now Netanyahu is not coming to Trump's inauguration because of that. And so that's a very good sign for, the anti-war movement when Trump is reposting videos from Jeffrey Sachs. But it's not even a true ceasefire. It's just I mean it's a ceasefire, but it's not, it's not a peace agreement really. It's just that they're temporarily going to stop fighting so they can exchange some hostages. And then my assumption will be that at some point between stages 2 and 3, this thing falls apart again, and Israel's going right back to business as usual. I think, like from the evidence I've gathered and from all the stories that you read and for how this is progressing, it seems like Israel is trying to occupy the northern half of the Gaza Strip. And so my theory on this is that this peace agreement is going to fall apart before phase 2. The bombing will continue, and Israel will attempt to get what they want. And I'm interested to see how Trump responds.
I honestly don't see him putting a stop to it. The only thing I know that Trump, like one of the things that Trump said is just get it done. Like, hurry up, just get it done. And it was like, get what done? Like the ethnic cleansing of the entire area? Is that what we're getting done here? Or go in, take out the bad guys, and then stop? What are we doing? Get it done. Just get it done. To me, it sounds like, hey, just go in there and kick the snot out of it. Just kill as many people as possible. Just get the conflict over with. I don't care if it's, innocent bystanders or whatever. Just go in there and whoop some ass and be done. I mean, that's what I feel like. That's the way it feels to me. And he has really not alluded too much to really that I've seen to just saying we need to end this conflict now. I don't hear that. And so I don't feel good. I agree with you, Brandon. I think it'll be short term, maybe 6-8 weeks. You might get a month and a half, 2 months of nothing, and then they go right back to business as usual. Because as long as Netanyahu's in power there, this is not going to end. You're not going to ever get an actual long-term ceasefire with Netanyahu and the Likud party at the helm in Israel. You are not going to have peace between the Palestinians and Israel because, as we've mentioned several times on here, that Netanyahu has stated to the media in Israel that they control the height of the flame. With the funding and everything to Hamas, they control the height of the flame, which means at any time we can turn the flame up, we can turn the fire up, get them all fired up, they'll attack us and give us a reason to go back in there and start blasting the heck out of everything. That's what they want. They don't want a two-state solution. That's it. That's it. They want all that land. They do not want a two-state solution. So if they can continue to incite violence, and I'm not saying that Hamas is some benevolent group of people who only wants peace and calm and to live in harmony with everyone. No, I'm not saying that. But I'm also not real happy about but again, we have to understand the actual problem in the situation. It is that Netanyahu has funded Hamas with a lot of money, and then at any time, the way he makes it sound is he can tick them off, get them launching rockets into Israel, doing whatever he can get them to do to incite another war, some more conflict where they get to go and drop massive bombs and just destroy whole cities or villages or whatever, and bury babies under rubble. I mean, that's just he seems to take a considerable amount of joy in that. So I don't know. The guy is a piece of crap. He is a war criminal. I don't care if the people in D.C. don't like the ICC's new thing. Boo-hoo. That guy is a monster. Netanyahu is a monster. Let's not kid ourselves. And we have an awful lot of people in Christian churches across this country that need to pull their heads out of their rear ends and stop thinking that the Bible teaches you that you have to back the government of Israel. That's what they think. They have, if Israel's going there blasting the crap out of Palestinians, it's because we have to back and we have to defend Israel. There's nothing wrong with defending the people of Israel if they're just trying to live in peace and they're just doing their own thing and people attack them. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, that's wrong. But if you're like, hey, just go in there and just wipe families out in the Gaza Strip because Israel's doing it and we have to back them, that's naive and that's really ignorant. And that's just not that, it's just we have a lot of Christians that need to learn that lesson.
The one of the most frustrating parts to me is that the Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, is like Israeli-based newspaper, is way more critical of Israel than any mainstream media. Like the mainstream media goes out of their way to word stories as if Israel is not to blame. It'll be like bomb falls from the sky, lands on Gaza Strip, kills 20. Doesn't mention Israel dropped the bomb. Doesn't, like, it says, as war rages on, more death in Gaza. And it's like, that's such the most, like, softball, like, it's not a lie, but it's like a lie by omission that you just blatantly glossing over the most important details of the story, which is who dropped the bombs and why they dropped them and who they dropped them on. Not, it's just like more deaths in Gaza from the war. It's like, no, Israel dropped a bunch of bombs on a bunch of innocent people in an attempt to kill maybe one or two terrorists. And if you know terrorist math, and we've talked about this before, the blowback, basically, that, killing someone's son or brother is going to create more animosity, especially innocent people. If you kill a bunch of innocent people, their family and their relatives and the people who care about them are going to want to join the resistance movement after that, naturally. And so it's crazy. It's crazy the way the mainstream media gets away with framing every story just to deflect blame away from Israel, and in Israeli media gets to actually be more honest about what's happening than the American media.
Yeah, it's so I mean, honestly, that should tell you when our government funds proxy wars in other nations, that should tell you, when you look at the media and how they're reporting things, that the mainstream media in this country is just the cheerleaders of the war machine. There's not many wars that have been going on lately that they haven't cheerleaded. They have literally become cheerleaders for the war machine. And they're happy to feed your kids into it, just not theirs. Will they go over there and fight? Absolutely not. But they're absolutely fine with sending your tax dollars or just the government printing more money and running up a debt and creating more inflation and chewing up other people's kids. Again, Romney and some of these other guys, like, oh, the more Russians we put in body bags, the better. These people are not human, and they're just cheerleading us into needlessly killing a bunch of innocent people. It's to the point. So what I heard, the Ukrainians are having to take mentally handicapped people and put them on the front lines now because they're kind of running low on the normal people. If
Well, every
that
country keeps, yeah, and every country keeps encouraging them to lower their conscription age too.
So, I mean, so, and we have people in this country who's Biden in his farewell address. This is one of the most striking things that I heard. We are, we are just as free as the Ukrainians. That's not very free. That's not very free at all. I mean, Biden was just laying out the dumbest thing after the dumbest thing in his farewell address. Anything he said, everything he said was so hypocritical. We did this and we did this. We did this with inflation. Okay, inflation's still really high. Okay. Oh, I wrote legislation that saved us from climate change. Oh, the California wildfires are from climate change. Which one is it, dude? Pick a freaking side. I'm starting to feel like I've had a stroke listening to you. But yeah, he bragged about what they've done in Ukraine. And it's like, if they're having to conscript mentally handicapped people into their army, that's not good. That's not what a free society, conscripting people into the army is not what a free society does anyway. But then you want to try to compare this country to that country, which is really backwards and stupid. But
not to mention that Ukraine basically enacted tyranny in defense of this war. They took away the freedom of the press, they took away elections, they took away religion, the freedom of religion,
political parties got eliminated.
And that's not to mention those are the people who didn't get conscripted. So yeah, tell me again how this is defending democracy again.
It's almost like, and we see it. We hear a lot of socialists who will defend Stalin, right? They'll defend Stalin, and it's no wonder they defend Zelensky and heap praise on him because he's doing some of the very things that Stalin eliminated political. Now he's not so-called eliminated political opponents, but Stalin, what he did with religion and what he's done with political parties. Now, Zelensky hasn't gone to the fact of creating camps and just eliminating his political opponents like that. But he's seemingly eliminating anything that could oppose him. If it's a train of thought like religion, we have to get rid of a religion because that could go against what I say. We have to get rid of political parties because they'll say the opposite of what I say. So it's very Stalin-esque or Hitler-esque or however you want to put it. It's very socialist. And so our country, supposedly a democracy, which I'm tired of that word, but that's what they love to preach at us, is we have to defend democracy. They're defending a person who somewhat acts like Joseph Stalin and Adolf Hitler. And also, there are Nazis in the Ukraine that support Zelensky. The same people who call Trump a Nazi supports a person in another country backed by Nazis. So what are you supposed to take away from that? Nothing intelligent.
No. And when you look at Trump's nominees coming in, Marco Rubio, even the news about what's her name?
Tulsi Gabbard?
Tulsi Gabbard. She's out now backtracking on FISA 702 because she was against the illegal spying of American citizens by our own government, and now she's for it. And it's very deflating if you were like, oh, Trump surrounded himself with better people. They're going to get the job done. And now they're all caving to, the will of the establishment Republican Party. It makes you wonder on how many different issues they're going to be willing to do that also. Like, are they even going to... I understand they have to go through a confirmation hearing, and it's filled with establishment Republicans and Democrats. So I understand saying that you would support FISA 702. But how many times do they say things in those confirmation hearings and then really back out of them? Or how many times do these people get into these high-level positions of power and end up not curtailing to the establishment? And she's already signaling that she's willing to do that. She didn't buck back and say, no, the majority of Republicans and the majority of people who supported Donald Trump, or the people who supported Donald Trump, didn't support these FISA 702 warrantless surveillance programs. Like, she didn't say that. No, she came out and said, actually, I think I support FISA 702. So when you're looking at all of these different people in Trump's administration caving, and even Marco Rubio had a preliminary something or another, and Rand Paul was asking him about his support for China. And every answer sounded like he had written it down and it was all pre-scripted answers, dodging every question, of course, without straight answers on any of it. Like, will you try to remove sanctions for these countries for peace and all of that? He's just like, well, the sanctions work and they do their job, and Iran is really struggling because of the sanctions we put on them. And so, sanctions, and tough on China. And I'm just like, man, there's a very good chance we are in for 4 more years of establishment politics, especially when it comes to foreign policy. And I will say, I credited Donald Trump last week on the show when he supported, what did he said? He talked about how arming Ukraine and letting them join NATO, and Biden's signaling to Ukraine that they'll eventually be able to join NATO, is what started this conflict. Trump acknowledged that out loud not very long ago. So there's glimmers of hope coming through here. And like I said, he reposted that video of Jeffrey Sachs. So there's he's dropping breadcrumbs that there might be something good coming. But with all of the rhetoric and all of the picks you have at your cabinet positions, and the ones that we liked flipping the script now, it's just, I don't know, deflating.
It is very deflating, but again, when you're in, and I'm not saying that these people were fully truthful when Trump tabbed them to be whatever cabinet pick. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that the system is, hey, if you want to be confirmed, you're going to have to change your tune, or we won't confirm you. Like, the state and as a whole is going to try very hard to bend people to its will. And so and here's the thing, folks, it's something we've talked about before. You could say, it'd be better if Ron Paul was, I don't get me wrong, I'd much rather have Ron Paul as a president. But think about the people that Ron Paul would pick to nominate for a cabinet position, right? And then think about the state of the federal government itself right now. Let's say a Ron Paulian type won the presidential vote, and he's going to be coming into office, and he tabs these people for cabinet positions. Do you think that the people in the Senate are going to want any of the people he would nominate if they were as principled or anywhere close to as principled as he is? You think they'd nominate, they would say, yeah, we'll confirm your nomination? Do you think they're going to? No, especially if they're Ron Paul types. Those people would be freaking the heck out. They're like, oh, yeah, I want Colonel Douglas McGregor to head up to the Department of Defense. They'd be like, whoa, that guy's not real big on war. What are we doing here? Or you get I'm just throwing out names here. You say, yeah. I want Tom Woods as the chairman of the Fed. And we're like, whoa, Tom Woods wants to end the Fed. It would be a train wreck for a person like that, because the central planners in the state, or the swamp, or whatever nickname you want to give them, are not going to want people of those frames, of those types, of that mindset, anywhere close to the head of a federal agency of any kind.
I get your point for sure, but the problem right now for me is that Donald Trump, clearly, if you've been following the MAGA cult, you know that Donald Trump, his word is the word of the Republican Party right now. So and he's only got 4 more years and one more good shot at this. And so this would be his time to say no, instead of backing out with Matt Gaetz and all this other stuff, just being like, no, these are my nominations and I want you to deny them. I'm not going to back out and pull someone off of my nomination because the establishment Republicans don't like him, you're going to go on record and you're going to vote no to my nominations, and I'm going to let the American people see. Like he could challenge these people into just confirming them because he's Trump. Because you're a Republican and I'm Trump, you're going to vote the way I tell you to, or I'll have you primaried. Like he actually does have that level of power right now, and it seems to me like he's refusing to flex it because he allowed Mike Johnson to become speaker. And there's no way, if you were constitutional, if you were looking to drain the swamp and all that, your first choice is Mike Johnson for speaker. There's just no way. And so
I have to admit something. Apparently, Brandon, Tom March has brought it to my attention. I guess I have neglected my duties of being upfront and honest with everybody, because Tom says saying some Ukrainians are Nazi makes you a Putin puppet. So sorry, guys, I'm a Putin puppet because I think
I've been a
Ukraine.
I've been a Putin puppet since like May of 2022. Yeah, you would think I get paid straight from the Kremlin.
Are you getting that RT money and not sharing it with me, like the Russia Today money? Are you not sharing it with me? That kind of ticks me off.
I keep that in I see it's in a Cayman Islands bank account, and I've got a checking and a savings. I'd have to transfer it from the savings to the checking, and then it's a whole process with a fee on top. You know, it's almost worth more trouble than it would be to give you the money. But yeah, I've bought and paid for by all of them. China, I'm Ukraine. I've been paid by the Iranians as well. Just the whole trifecta, really.
So, and it's just full disclosure, folks. We don't want to mislead you into saying that we're just, we love liberty. We got some. Apparently, Brandon's been receiving dark communist money, because like if we talk about certain people, if you talk smack about, certain people like Dean Plocker or John Patterson, you've been accused of taking dark liberal money by hillbilly thunderbutt Scott Fawn. So apparently Brandon's taking dark socialist money or dark communist money or dark Nazi. I don't know. Yeah, it'd be dark socialist or communist money. And he's also not being very socialist because he's not sharing his resources. So he's really sending mixed signals right now.
Yeah. Speaking of communism, the TikTok ban is set to start on Sunday. Your initial thoughts?
Okay, I did an episode about this. The last time they were, framing a bill to get rid of TikTok. And I said on my show at that time, that's the way I look at it. So the government's like, the Chinese are spying on you. Blah, 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 blah. If you have one of these in your hand, if you carry one of these in your pocket, which is a smartphone, guess what? You're being spied on every day. And it's your own government. Okay, let me ask a question. And Brandon, then I'll let you have at this. Just a question. If you were going to be scared of two different, like if you had to pick who you'd be more afraid of the most, okay? Are you going to be more afraid of the Chinese government, who is way far away? They can't just like hop, skip, and jump across a couple islands and land on our shores and start, invading us by the millions? Or are you more scared of a government that seemingly thinks of you as the enemy anyway, that literally uses a device that you carry around every day as a spying device? Who am I more worried about? I'm worried more about my own government than what the Chinese government thinks of me. That's just the way I am. I'll admit it. I do go on TikTok. I have found some great liberty stuff on TikTok. I found some funny stuff, and I found some great content on there. So I do, and I have posted several videos on liberty topics on TikTok. I have myself used TikTok many, many times. Am I worried about the app? Not a whole lot, because I know what my own government is capable of and does every day with all the data centers. So, and they're much closer to me. So I'm just saying, that's what I.
Another interesting point is that if you look at all of the people who are the most pro-Israel. They are also the most banned TikTok. Apparently, the support for Palestine is pretty heavy on TikTok, and Israel hates that. So they were a big part of lobbying this
Oh.
bill through in Congress. If anybody who knows who Ian Carroll is, then you've probably already seen his video on TikTok and this new app called Red Note. So out of protest or just looking for a similar app that to TikTok, a bunch of people are downloading this other app called Red Note, but it's got another name called Shai Hong Shu. It's a Chinese app. It's another Chinese app, a social media app, and apparently it's been the most free downloaded app in the US this week. So a bunch of people are flocking to a different Chinese company's app, and I'm sure that, you know, the second if people start posting pro-Palestinian stuff or anti-establishment narratives, they'll immediately come in and shut down this website too. But how funny and ironic is it that people, they are like, we need to get rid of the communist Chinese ability to spy on us. And you're totally right. By our government is spying on us on an extreme level. Edward Snowden is proof of that for sure. And the American government is the one with the power to come and arrest you and take away and freeze your bank account like they did in Canada, which we talked about last week. So like our government is the one who has the authority over you. So yeah, if I'm worried about one group spying on me versus the other, I would actually be more afraid of my own government spying on me. What are they going to do spying on me in China? Have my data? Okay, you'll see I've been scrolling anti-American, not anti-government, but I've been scrolling a lot of constitutional, you know, anti-tyranny stuff. And so I don't really care if the Chinese government sees that. I'm way more worried about the American government seeing what I'm doing on the internet. But I just think it's super funny that the response to having TikTok banned was go download another Chinese app.
See, and that's, you know, and that's the thing that people, you know, government policies, again, we talk about the drug war and other things. When they try to just outright ban something, they just drive people into another area. You know, if you set like prohibition, what they do, people just started making their own alcohol. Of course, our government also poisoned some of the alcohol, but still, people went in and found a way to get alcohol. If you're like, we're banning weed, people will find a way to get weed. You ban an app, someone is going to come up with another app pretty similar to that and create a new one, and they're going to drive traffic because a lot of people want what they want. If they want it bad enough, they'll go to the black market or they'll go to someone similar with the same type of app and they'll start using it. Now, the only thing is, if that keeps happening, it gives our government thinks it gives them an excuse to write legislation that will just ban any type of application like that, especially if there's enough content, like you were talking about, anti-Israel content on there. Someone was like, we can't have this type of application anymore. If it comes from this country, this country, this country, we're banning them all. And they'll just do it. And then, yeah, but people, there are enough innovators out there. And that's what's great about living in this country. The government says you can't do this. And there's all kinds of people, no matter what political party they come from, that will find a workaround. And they'll create something that's outside of that law. And then the government's just chasing its tail. As people keep creating and creating, they have to keep chasing these people around, trying to figure out how to stop it. And then they think, oh, we got them now. And then somebody comes up with something else. And I hope that all this innovation and all these people who decide we're not doing it, we'll create something else. I hope it causes severe alcohol or even more severe alcoholism in these idiots up in D.C. who want to control us all. I hope they're just pickling all their livers and pickling their brains with alcohol while they just sob uncontrollably how, oh my God, we just can't get these people under total control yet. What do I have to do to be complete overlords? So yeah.
Yeah. Thomas Massey had a pretty good point on it. That first of all of our tech comes from China. All the chips in all of our cars and computers come from China. The suits that they wear in the Congressional Hall, a lot of those come from China or are made in China. So you're just if you're like being worried about TikTok. I mean, they're not even. I understand that a lot of social media companies and TikTok were collecting data, but they weren't. There was no immediate danger or threat to the American public from this. So all you're doing is inhibiting business. And another point is that what you're not going after TikTok. If you like, TikTok is a Chinese company, so you can't go after them. What you do is you go after the people. You go after the American companies just for hosting the app. And like those are the people who would get the civil lawsuits. And so it's just totally backwards, and it just gives the government more power. And every time you give them power, they will eventually do the worst case scenario thing you can think of. Like they will eventually flex it to the max given the opportunity. They do almost every single time.
Absolutely. All right, folks, just as a reminder, possibly next week Friday will be the last Friday that we live stream, and then we will switch to Tuesday nights. It's same time, 6:30 p.m. Let's be on a different night. And just remember, if next Friday is our last Friday show, let me pull up my calendar so I give everybody the correct date. So our first Tuesday show would be February the 4th, because we wouldn't do one on the 31st. So February 4th would be our first show. It will be a legislative review with Tom Woods and possibly Catherine Dreyer. So again, next Friday I should know something concrete. I hope I do, because I'm really ready to just flip the switch and get this party started. But yes, that'll be a big change. So Tuesday nights instead of Friday nights, 6:30 p.m. on YouTube and Rumble. And we're going to have a new show the first Tuesday of every month. And it's something that I hope that you all will gain a lot of knowledge from and enjoy hearing Tom and all his wit. Like I said, he just called me a Putin puppet. That's just Tom's term of endearment for me now. I'm Putin puppet, and he is a Marxist. So it's something that we can all, I think, enjoy, learn a lot from. So I hope you all will tune in. But again, I will update you next Friday, but I'm hoping that's the direction so I can set a date and we can just go, and I don't have to keep stringing this along and dragging it out as my coworkers or bosses try to make up my mind for me. So that's what we're looking forward to. Thanks again to all of those of you on MOLibertyRadio.us on YouTube and Rumble and all the podcatching apps. Thank you all for your continued support. Thanks to Voodoo Queen, Tom Martz, Warrior Class 3, Catherine Dreyer, David Dwyer, and all the others who tuned in tonight. Thank you all, and we'll see you next Friday, maybe the last Friday, right here on the Missouri Liberty Report.